I recently saw this tweet from the world of engineering. Newton's three laws of motion form an essential component of modern physics, and like many scientific laws, they're rather elegant in their simplicity. In video number 3 of this series, you saw how Christian theology was in large part responsible for the assumption that laws of nature exist and that we can discover and comprehend those laws. Also, in video number 2 of this series, you saw how religion has been intimately tied to science throughout history. In this video, you will see that Isaac Newton was no exception to this. The most famous scientist in history would have laughed at the notion that Christianity holds science back, and he strongly disagreed that science and Christianity are incompatible. He thought that our solar system could only have been created by an intelligent being with superior knowledge of mechanics and geometry. In today's terms, Newton was an intelligent design proponent, and he openly stated that the intelligence was the Christian God. Newton said himself that his whole intent in writing his seminal work, his Principia Mathematica, was to clearly formulate a natural philosophy that would vindicate his Christian faith and refute atheism. When I wrote my treatise about our solar system, the Principia, I had an eye upon such principles as might work with considering men for the belief of a deity, and nothing can rejoice me more than to find it useful for that purpose. The diurnal rotations of the sun and planets, as they could hardly arise from any cause purely mechanical, they seem to make up that harmony in the system which was the effect of choice rather than of chance. Isaac Newton's understanding of the universe was driven by his view of God and by his Christian faith. Granted, his Christian views were non-Trinitarian, but he did believe that God created the universe, that God was continuously active in the world, that God could do miracles, and that Jesus is Lord, Messiah, Redeemer, and one that loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood. His non-orthodox views on Christianity came not from discounting the Bible, but instead from his personal attempt to return to what he thought was a pure biblical doctrine. In relating the Bible to his science, Newton also stressed, like Kepler, Galileo, and John Calvin before him, that the Bible is written in human language to accommodate the understanding of our common experience. So he saw no conflict between his science and the Bible. All of that being said, the main point is that his religious beliefs did not hold him back or hinder his science. The grand synthesis and creation of a new system of physics was accomplished because of Isaac Newton's beliefs about God and because of his beliefs about the Creator's relationship with the universe. Newton's new physics was essentially a mathematical synthesis of Descartes and Boyle's passivity of matter, combined with the absolute space of Gassendi, and then also combined with the Platonic idea of universal active principles that operate in nature. Newton defined a force as a cause of motion that can be described mathematically. And his insistence that forces could act at a distance, even if that meant constant action by God, was a necessary step to our understanding of gravity and electromagnetism. He defaulted to some kind of universal active principle to explain gravity when he couldn't find a mechanical explanation for it. He was also unable to derive the mathematical explanation for gravity from first principles, so he had to determine his universal law of gravitation from observation. Newton thought that since gravity was not explicable as properties of passive matter, and also could not be accounted for in terms of mechanical contact, it had to be evidence of God's imposition and maintenance of control on the stuff in the universe. Even though they depended on God, Newton's supramechanical principles were not miraculous or supernatural in the sense of being unpredictable, and they in no way interfered with the ability of scientists to explain phenomenon in terms of secondary causes. Gravity, even though it is due to God's divine action, still operates according to a precise mechanical law. Now, Newton also thought that without constant divine intervention, the universe would run down. Therefore, God had to intervene periodically to keep everything running with regularity. For example, Newton thought that planetary orbits would eventually decay without some additional outside force pushing them back into alignment. Because of this, God used the periodic appearance of comets to bring the planetary orbits back into alignment. This happened to fit perfectly with Newton's theology and demonstrates how closely his religious views aligned with his science. Just like planetary orbits would become corrupted, God's people also tended to corrupt religion. Therefore, God had to continue to periodically send prophets to effect religious reformation. In Newton's cosmology, comets fulfilled a similar role. Newton makes the point in his general scholium from his Principia that God is the same God always and everywhere. He is omnipresent, not virtually, but also substantially, for virtue cannot subsist without substance. We know him only by his most wise and excellent contrivances of things and final causes. A God without dominion, providence, and final causes is nothing else but fate and nature. Gottfried Leibniz believed that Newton's view of God, having to constantly tweak his creation, makes the creator an inferior craftsman. Leibniz held that God had endowed brute matter with the ability to execute his laws perfectly without interference from God. The constant need to adjust things in the universe was a denial of the perfection of the original creation and inconsistent with the omnipotence of God. Newton, on the other hand, preferred a God that was always with us and thought Leibniz's perfect clockmaker analogy removed the need for God. For Newton, a mechanical philosophy without God was unimaginable. The main point here is that the debate between Newton and Leibniz, who also disagreed over whether action at a distance was possible, the debate was waged on religious and not scientific grounds. Both Newton and Leibniz saw their science and their Christian beliefs as intimately connected. Their Christian beliefs did not hinder or hold back science in any way. Newton's writings demonstrated a profound awareness of the presence of God in nature, the cosmos, human history, and the scriptures, including the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. His thought also reveals that for him, there was ultimately no partition between the study of God and the practice of natural philosophy. The cosmos and the Bible are equally worthy of study and are in profound agreement with each other precisely because they are both revelations of God.